Welcome to Overnight Wisdom, a show where we sit with change makers, artists, business leaders, and thinkers. Each conversation is an invitation to slow down, to go deeper, and unearth the quiet insights that shape who we are. If you're seeking honest reflections, unexpected wisdom, and a deeper understanding of what it takes to not merely survive, but to thrive, you're in the right place. Nigeria is Africa's giant, rich in culture, talent, and promise. Yet, 65 years after independence, its citizens are still asking the same questions. Why do we recycle the same leaders? Why does religion dictate politics? And why are 20 million children out of school? In this conversation with my long-term friend, Prince, or Ify as I call him, we cut through the noise. We talk about apathy, accountability, and why Nigerians deserve more than recycled promises. We ask, if Nigeria were a business, who would you trust to run it? This is about the future of Africa's most populous country, and by extension, the future of the continent. Let's get into it. Hi, Ify.
Yeah.
How's life?
Life is good. Okay, so before we start, right, let me say this. All right,
Okay.
everyone listening. So, as I've known Chisom for a long time, she's gonna be calling me Ify and Ifeanyi, which is my name, my Igbo name. So don't be confused if you see Prince and she says Ifeanyi. It's all me. All right, yeah. So go ahead.
Yes, I never got on the Prince wagon. Like I've always known it's your name, but I've been on the Ify wagon my entire
I
the
love
entire
it.
time I've known you, so all good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So how is where you're in?
I'm in Oslo,
You're in
Norway.
Oslo. Okay, so Chisom
Yeah,
is talking from Oslo. I'm here in the US, and
yeah.
yeah, we've been friends for a long time, like a long
Long
time.
time. Hmm.
And
I was 10, you were 11?
I was 11, yes.
Hmm? Yeah.
Good times. We have very strong views on things, and we just thought we should share these views with you guys.
We have opinions about things. You have your
Hmm.
opinions, I have my opinions, and I think one of the things we do care about here is Nigeria.
Right? Yep.
I care about its future, its leadership, its politics, its economy, and I think you do as well. So I'd love to be able to process what that looks like
Uh-huh.
with you, especially given 2027 as an impending year for a new election.
Yeah,
What
I
are
know.
Nigerians voting for example?
I hope people are gearing up, and I hope that one thing also, like before we like get into the main thing, is other African countries, they people who are in diaspora can vote, but Nigeria hasn't done that yet.
I wonder why though.
Yeah, that's I've always wondered that
I
because
feel
like yeah, go ahead.
No, I feel like is a systematic programming,
Hmm.
right? If
I
people
think
have to
so too.
fly home to vote, like you make everything impossibly difficult
Hmm.
for people to actually have a voice. I
Right.
mean, it's true. I haven't voted in Nigeria for the past
Probably since you left.
2.5 decades.
I know.
Absolutely. Like it's
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. Like ever since I could vote. But there's also the thing about like, yes, I could go home and vote, but there's a part of me that's like, does my vote even matter?
Matter. That's true. And that's the major thing. And like going back, like because I know I have Ghanaian friends who are here, and I think Ghanaians they go to their embassy to vote. So yeah, I don't know why Nigeria hasn't made that possible. Everything is big in Nigeria, and the main thing about leadership is there's always red tapes and things that hamper people from engaging. So yeah, man, we're gonna be
Yeah.
talking about all of these things, and
Yeah.
yeah,
So let's start
yeah,
with
yeah,
religion. I think maybe just to frame this, I think
yeah.
since we're talking about leadership, it's
Uh-huh.
important to break down the things that impede on how Nigerians as people
Mm-hmm.
view leadership, what their
Right.
expectation is of leadership, and how that is demanded or not demanded. And I think like through this, we're going to talk about things like healthcare and education.
Uh-huh.
But one of the things that is very present for me is religion.
Right.
Like Nigeria is an incredibly religious country.
Right.
On one hand, we have majority Christians and Muslims, and then a very minority group of indigenous religions and sects
Right.
within the
Mm-hmm.
country. But ultimately, it's like you're Christian, you're Muslim. And then
Yeah.
that becomes, in some capacity, overwhelming
Mm-hmm.
And when we think about leadership, I've spoken to a couple of people who say to me nonsense like God will provide. God is not providing.
I mean, yeah, it's the religious mindset, and yeah, you're absolutely right. It's even though they're indigenous like religious groups, but it's mostly the Christian and Muslim that are predominantly ruling. One thing I was just going on this path is I know previously in Nigeria they try to make it that if a president is Muslim, then the vice is from like another religion. Like I've heard something like that before, or from another side.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I've read about that before. But it's interesting that the vice president, I think his name is like Kishima or something like that. He also believe he's Muslim as well. So maybe it's ethnic because I think because Tinubu is Yoruba. I think maybe he's Hausa. But I think Tinubu is a Muslim, right? Is he? I
Probably.
think
Who
so.
knows?
I think so.
But the
But
point is like, should it even matter? If it,
right, exactly. That's the issue. That's the thing here.
because that's the thing. When we get to a point where we're just like, oh, if you have a Muslim president, the vice president must be Christian. Like, is that where we're at? Like all the nonsense going on in the country. I want to frame this by saying how Nigeria does determines how the African continent fares. It's really that simple from an
Mm,
economic perspective, also from a geopolitical perspective. Right? So if
mhm,
you think about it as Nigeria is going to be the third most populated country in the world by 2050 behind India and China. And then by 2100, that's in 75 years, Nigeria is going to be the second most populated country in the world behind India. We do not have the infrastructure, the governance, the leadership to manage that growth. I mean, we're struggling already as we are, I think, 237 million people.
mhm.
We don't even have the bandwidth for electrification, for education, for healthcare. We need to have proper conversations about what is the vision for the country and what is a distraction to get there. So
Right.
I have a few questions like we can frame around
Mhm.
like the conversation we want to have. And the first question
Right.
I want to ask Ify is, how
Mhm.
has religion shaped Nigeria's political alliances? And I think you
Right.
hinted on that when you're talking
Uh-huh.
about president must be Muslim and the other guy must be Christian. Okay.
Yeah.
And to what extent do you think that our leaders exploit faith as a tool for power rather than service?
These are like very great discussions. So the first thing is about how religious alliances and how does religion shape leadership in Nigeria? And I think it does. Like it's undeniable. Like religion is a major thing. Even when people are running for office, I think they exploit that religious thing in Nigeria and they use that political coin. And you find maybe in some churches, some pastors begin to indicate that God says this is who we should vote for to make their audience or their congregation believe that voting for this person is coming from God. And you find out that even during elections, it's not far fetched to believe that some pastors are actually paid or some faith based people are
Hell
paid
yeah.
to make their congregation vote on a side, so to speak. So I think that religion definitely has something to do. It plays a huge role in kind of the political alliances in Nigeria and election strategy and faith is exploited. Of course, a pastor can pray and say, "Hey, God says this is the leader," and people will believe in that congregation that this is the person that our pastor says who is our medium to God, that this is the person we should vote for. So it is a major issue, when
Mm.
it comes to election. And the question begs, how can people understand that, hey, yes, if you're religious, you believe in God, that's great. However, you have to look at the person that you're voting for. What policies do they have in place? What is their how have they politicized in the past? If they were a governor,
What is
how
your
did they
track
rule?
record?
Exactly. What is their track record? So these are the things, and I think just not to sway us from it, but I think that one of the things I will highly suggest in the Nigerian political campaign is debate. I don't think Nigerian politicians have debates like they do in the US and in other
Mm.
country policies and things like that. And well, but what do you think, though?
I think what Nigeria needs in terms of how we choose leaders is track record. I mean, for my
I agree.
entire life, we've been recycling essentially the same leaders my entire freaking life.
Hmm.
Now, I have no problem with the same leaders being in office, but what have they done?
Hmm.
Why are we voting for them? What is the track record, right? If you have a child, give your child to a doctor who has zero track record of results. Like every child they touch die, and you're just like, yeah, my child go.
Hmm.
So it's like, how are we viewing ourselves within the context of the country? Just to go back a bit about what you talked about with pastors and like religion. I mean, I often say this and I say it semi as a joke, but I really mean it. Like one of the best startup ideas, like if you're trying to invest in anything in Nigeria, invest in a church. That money will 10x, 20x, 30x, 40x, because that's where money is made. And I
Hmm.
think that as much as we're a very religious country and we believe
Right.
in God and God is great. I mean, I have nothing against religion. I have nothing against faith. I think that religion can be a tool for bringing community together, for preserving people's mental health, for giving them something to aspire to and hope for. But I think that religion has been weaponized and it is essentially a political ideology. And I think no matter how this shakes out, I think oftentimes as Nigerians, we just assume that religion was born in us. But no,
Right.
Islam and Christianity were colonial imports. Now, I'm
Mm.
not saying they're good or bad. I mean, we can break that down another day, but they are essentially a colonial import. And as a matter of fact, they're a political ideology. Oh, so I think that we need to start asking ourselves. It's the same thing around like ethnocentrism and ethnicity. It's like who's Igbo, who's Yoruba, who's Hausa, who's Calabar, who's Edo, who's this. Like
Mhm.
people will literally vote somebody in because he's Igbo or because he's Yoruba.
Right.
Like what is the track record? What
Because it's their
rights
turn.
do they exactly like what rights do they have to actually be in this country to lead this country? Because we need to reframe the understanding that leadership is a service. It's not for people to oil their pockets, but that's exactly what it is right now. It's like it's my turn to take money and oil my pocket and put it in all my bank accounts. It is my turn to be enriched from the country. So I wanted to just frame that like
Uh-huh.
there is a fundamental challenge with religion, and I think we can talk about this maybe at a later time about the importance of secularity, where we
Uh-huh.
need that separation of church and state. But I do want to say the thing about debates.
Right.
I do think that, yes, it would be nice finally for a debate. So people are asking questions and we can say,
Uh-huh.
like, who can actually answer them. But at
Right.
the same time, I'm also mindful that Nigerians can easily fall for the person who comes from their ethnic group or their religion who can string two decent sentences together in English language and you're like, yeah, that's the guy I vote for. So ultimately we need to look at what are the facts? What have they done? And if they
Uh-huh.
haven't done enough, why are we
Uh-huh.
still recycling the same people for the past 4 or 5 decades in the country?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I totally agree with in terms of track record. I think that's a huge thing. One thing I would say, like, I don't envision a time where like the political sphere in Nigeria will be totally void of religion. That is why it's important to find ways, I would say, to work around the religious aspect of it because religion is part of the fabric.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's a huge export
Mm-hmm.
of Nigerians. Like if you go to various countries, so I think religion is part of Nigeria, the Nigerian
Nigerians are running
mentality.
all the churches abroad. Is that what you're
Abroad,
saying?
yeah, like they take it. Oh, I'm telling you, it's like huge. There was a pastor that was recently deported from South Africa because he was doing things he wasn't supposed to do. So it's huge, and it's embedded in that Nigerian society. So although it's not good, if we can get away from this over reliance or them exploiting religion, but we can shed light and expose the exploitation, which is why I brought about the debate aspect of it. And I do, kind
Mm.
of understand where you're coming from. I think it's Nigerians that have to be the ones to poke holes and expose those things so they can really vote for the right person.
I think there's something about knowing where you come from before
Mm-hmm.
you know where you're going. I mean, for me as well, like it's hard to look at a country where we don't place religion and God at the center of, how we move, what we do, and God's provision of everything.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us don't know our history. I think a lot of us do not know how systematically calculating and violent
Mm-hmm.
colonialism was, and especially British colonialism. I think a lot of people know Nigeria post-independence. In 1960, we had independence, and then you had the Biafran War, and then,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us don't know the history beyond that. We know we are colonized, but that's about it. So I think that if we know who we are or who we were, and yeah, we're a bunch of like tribes and ethnic groups brought together. One of my friends put it very clearly where she said, in Nigeria, we are not Nigerians. In Nigeria, we're Igbo and Yoruba and Hausa and Calabar and Efik and Ibibio.
Mm-hmm.
We are only Nigerians outside of Nigeria. We
That's
don't
interesting.
see ourselves as one. We
Mm-hmm.
see ourselves as a divided people.
Right. Right.
And if we
That's
continue to
interesting.
see ourselves as a divided people, we will not start looking at what is this country that we need to create, that we need to fix. Because unless we're about to divide into 28 or even 2 different countries, we have to figure a way to work and coexist together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that keep coming up for me is if we look at this country as a business, if you're running a company, how many of these leaders will be the CEO? How many of them would you say, yeah, lead me? Because you're responsible for paying me a salary. Because they will run that company right into the ground. But we've come to a place in a country where we do not have faith in governance. We do not think our government will provide for us. There
Mm-hmm.
is no social security. There's no safety net.
Mm-hmm.
And then we are the lion of Africa, we're this and that. And Nigerians are resilient, But I think we also have to talk about the reality that a lot of Nigerians, yourself, myself, I do a lot of work in Nigeria, but still, a lot of us are doing amazing work abroad because also our government has not created an enabling environment for us to come back to and thrive.
Right. Yeah. Everything you said is totally accurate. It's something that has shaped leadership in the country. Just like you said, kind of knowing who we are as a country. I think that will help. If people know who they are, that will kind of alleviate how leaders exploit faith as a way to get votes during a way to kind of elections. But
So I have a
yeah.
specific question for you. In a country where we see that Christianity and Islam are dominant,
Hmm.
how do you think that religious institutions have contributed to unity in the country or the lack
Hmm.
thereof?
Hmm.
Or do you think they deepen ethnic and religious regional fault lines?
I don't think that they help cultivate any healthy relationships. I think it's all the fault lines. There's always going to be that tension. I think religion in Nigeria is a divisive factor. It increases the lines, and it's not a thing of coming together.
On the basis of religion, I do think that it's often used as a distraction. I'm new to TikTok.
Mhm.
So I joined a live just to have a listen where Nigerians were talking about challenges in the country, and it so quickly fell to it's the Muslims or it's the Christians. Can we actually imagine a Nigeria
Mhm.
that is truly secular,
Right.
like anything else? That is a precondition for power, as religion is a precondition for power. It can be wielded for good or for bad. A lot of the wars across the world have also been fought on the basis of religion and faith and belief, right? And I can go into a schmeal. There is no religion in the world that is beneficial to women, period. Right? So there's a lot we can unpack. But if you look at it from like a cultural perspective, if we hold true that religion is a colonial import, even though it's good in some ways, it is weaponized, unfortunately, as a distraction. It's so easy to come and say, this person is a Christian, why take them seriously? This person is a Muslim, why take them seriously? Whereas as a country, what we need to be focusing on is how do I put the best person? I don't care if they come from the gutter. How do I put the best person in office to take this country forward where we need to be, where people stop seeing the office and governance and leadership as their birthrights?
I think we are getting to that level.
You're more hopeful than I am. We're not getting to that level. We need to fight for that level.
This is the reason why I say that, right? Because everything is gradual. In the beginning of this year, I don't know if you heard about it. There was a girl, a youth corper, that came online. I think it was on TikTok, and she spoke with passion about how disappointed she is about Tinubu. She called him like a terrible president. It made headlines everywhere. She was popular for like a week. Something came out now that she was disciplined for her opinions, which is bad, right? And I think she also had problems with getting her NYSC certificate because according to the laws and regulations of NYSC, you cannot make those kind of opinions while you're serving the country, which I understand.
No, I don't understand that. I'm sorry. No.
But I get it, you don't understand, but every institution has their rules and regulations, right? So we have to, I get it, they have their rules and regulations, but
if these are the things we have to question, I'm sorry, no. So, and I'm going to interrupt you there. We can't accept nonsense and say this. No. It's how things are done. So, like, what's that thing? The most dangerous sentence in the English language is like, we've always done it this way.
Same way.
Every one of us has a fundamental human right to say our government, our leaders are not doing what you're supposed to be doing. There should be no gag order, no reprimand for somebody speaking their mind. As long as I'm not inciting people to come to your house and burn down your house, I get to say, when you are a president, when you are a governor, when you are a leader, you work for me. We're not there yet in Nigeria, but that's where we need to be.
Exactly, but that's the point I'm making, that we are getting there. The reason why I brought that example and said we're getting to, from the question you asked me, that we are getting to that level is because of what this girl did. Back in the days, people couldn't do this. It's just like during COVID, the end SARS protest and all these things. I'm going to give like you said, I'm a bit more optimistic than you might be. The reason is because I think that these things are going to come gradually, because you have to understand that, and even though Nigeria is a democracy, and we talk about this, and I have no opinion about African countries who are democratic states and why I think that democracy might not be the best form of government for Nigerians, which we will discuss later on. Because if you look at examples of other countries, look at the Sahel Alliance, for example, look at Rwanda, for example, look at
Faso.
Exactly. It's part of the Sahel Alliance. Look at how good they're doing. And they're not democratic states, right? But, back to my point is that I'm saying, okay, Nigeria, we're getting to that point where people are going to begin to think for themselves, and people are not going to be voting based on religion anymore. But it's going to take time. And I think our generation is going to be the generation. And I'm so hopeful for this. I'm looking forward, and I thank God we're talking about this now, because 2027 is going to I'm optimistic about it. And to tie everything together from what that girl did beginning of this year, I think, more people are going to be able to opine, talk about things that they couldn't do in the past. And these things are going to be the driving force that gets people to understand that, wait, I'm not just going to vote someone because they are Muslim or they are Christian or because they are Hausa or because they are Yoruba or because they are Igbo. I'm going to vote for them because they have a good track record or they have good policies. So I think we are getting there, but
given the fact that we're both about to be 40 soon.
Why are you exposed now?
I'm just no, but I think it's important to note, right?
We look good though. We look good for 40.
Yeah, of course, we look great for 40. But my point is exactly that we need a rush, because this gradual is snail pace, right?
Yeah.
And it's not been any different from our parents' generation. I talked to my mom. My mom is like, yeah, it's always been like this. I refuse to accept that this is how it should be. But we also have to acknowledge that what you're seeing, the people who have opinions and are stating them, they are a minority. The vast majority of Nigerians are indifferent, are apathetic, or they do not care. And that is
Mm-hmm.
the reality. So what we need to do is invest heavily in civic education. Because that's the thing, it's like a president's come around and it's like, I'm going to fix education. The president is not responsible for education in your local government area. You need to understand the law. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, in the US, they tell you, call your senator, call your this, call your reps. Who is a rep in Lekki? Who is a rep in Akwa Ibom? Who is a rep in Anambra State? There are people who do not know that. Governance in Nigeria in so many ways has been modeled up. It's so elusive. We see it there for election. People get riled up.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, when somebody says, I'm going to fix education, the next question is how? Specifically, give me numbers, because what gets measured gets done.
Debates.
But it's not just debates. It's give me, I want to put together, I want to talk to all the people running for government in
Uh-huh.
2025 or president in 2027. I want to talk to each and every one of them. You want to fix healthcare? Give me some numbers. How many hospitals are you going to build? How many health practitioners are you going to educate or attract back to the country? Even the ones within the country that are without jobs, which equipment are you going to put in place? Just I want to see, because if we cannot measure it, we cannot track it, and they continue to string 2, 3 sentences of nonsense to us, and we're like, yay, we feel excited. So I just think Nigerians need to have higher standards, because if we do not know what to ask for, we can't demand it. So that's kind of like where I'm coming from. I think there's so much distraction on everything else. Like if it's not religion, it's ethnicity, it's this, it's that. And sometimes people are just in struggle mode. People are trying to survive.
I think that's the main thing, but yeah, I think it's the survival mode thing that you mentioned. That's a very important factor. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, people are just trying to survive, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
that's ultimately what it is. And then I've been talking to a lot of Nigerian women founders
Mm-hmm.
lately because of a program we're running on the ground. And I see these women solving problems that the government should have solved. But in the absence of government doing the work that they should be doing, ordinary citizens are trying to fix the bare minimum in healthcare, in farming, in agriculture, in food supply, in logistics.
I mean, that's always been the case in Nigeria. I think because, like we mentioned in the beginning, Nigerians are very resilient people. So that's always been something that Nigerians have found a way to do. Like if the government is not going to do it, we're going to do it. It's like you
Mm.
find people in Nigeria building their own fantasy life.
Transformers,
The
electricity.
generator, and yeah, so it's just that's just part of the Nigerian mentality, and I think which ties into the fact that Nigeria has become such a society of, man, if I want to do it, I can't depend on the government.
I do it myself.
Yeah, I do it myself, and that affects even voting, even having faith. Like you're talking about your represent, who is the like I think Nigerians no longer have faith in the system,
Of course not.
which impacts every other thing. So if people don't have faith in the system, people are used to doing things by themselves. It's just going to be like, you know what? Even if I vote, even if I come out, nothing is going to happen. So I'm just
Yep,
going to keep doing what I'm doing to survive how I'm doing it. So yeah,
yep.
that's part of it.
Can we talk a little bit about like the merge or like the intersection of
Hmm.
ethnicity and religion? Because I think you alluded to it earlier a
Yeah.
bit. Because religion is just this massive beast, but we also know it has lines along ethnicity. The sense of disunity
Hmm.
between us as a people.
Hmm.
But I think that is also indicative of rhetorics. Because when I
Hmm.
start to think about it, like, is this grounded in fact? Or is this grounded in what I have passively consumed? In
Hmm.
terms of, I know people who would not marry someone because they are Yoruba or this or that.
Yeah.
Like, we have a
Hmm.
problem in the country. So I think, what does it take to actually start seeing ourselves? So maybe that's a question to you. What does it
Hmm.
take to start seeing ourselves as Nigerians rather than a different kind of Muslim than that Muslim, and then
Yeah.
different ethnicities and different groups
Hmm.
of people?
Yeah. I think that okay,
You're just like jump question.
like you mentioned before, what your friend says that it's only when we come outside we see ourselves as Nigerians, and we're in Nigeria we see ourselves as different ethnic groups. I was recently talking to someone from Rwanda, and we're just talking because I know every African country has tribes and things like that. So I kind of alluded to, okay, what tribe are you from? And she mentioned that there are no tribes in Rwanda. Although when I talked to somebody else, they told me there are tribes. But I think what I understood was that there's the concept of tribalism, they're trying to wipe it away.
Mm.
And one of the things they're doing is like, I think in Rwanda, there's only one language. To go back to your question, I think that the ethnicity and all that stuff is embedded in society. We as Nigerians, we have to find a way to curtail these things and policies to minimize the overemphasis on tribalism and ethnic groups, especially when you have to come with policies and things that have to do with the masses or in Nigeria as a whole. I know,
Mm-hmm.
like people can always have their identity, which is where they're from, Igbo, Yoruba. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
it, right? But policies and things that have to do with the citizenry, we have to find a way to minimize that from being like, like being quantifier or a qualifier for various like political office. Once they start doing that, then people will start seeing that, and then I think it will have a trickle down effect to those who are like the regular citizenry. Will now start saying, okay, this doesn't really matter because I mean you're not gaining anything from saying that you're this or that. I
Mm.
just think that policies need to be void of
Yes.
those things.
There needs to
That's
be a
the only way.
separation.
There needs to be
Yeah.
separation. I think things that have to do with the country needs to be void of those heavily, ethnic and tribal influence. What do you think?
I agree with that. We have our cultures, we have our languages,
Hmm.
we have our foods. There are places where they integrate, yay, jollof.
And
But I think that there needs to be, so you can celebrate that, you can hold on to that.
right.
But collectively, we need to start thinking about Nigeria as a business,
When
as
when
a
you say
large,
when you say
massive,
that,
sorry.
when you no go on, when you say it's a business, tell me more about that.
Imagine the country, running the country is a company, and then you demand better of your leaders. Imagine
Because
if like you had a crappy CEO for Microsoft and Apple and, Intel and I don't know, any of the big companies in the world. If we start thinking about it more pragmatically and away from, because if you're an Igbo person, and you're a crap leader and you're responsible for my income and you're going to run it into the ground, I don't want you leading. I want you out. I want the person who is capable to be there. So I think there needs to be that separation because we keep thinking about this country as something that is not ours. And you said something which brought this up for me around our leaders have proven to us over and over and over again that they don't care about us. So our leaders don't need to do anything at this point. People need to start, you, me, and all of us need to start demanding more of our leaders. Somebody I was talking to recently from Kenya, he was talking about what he's a Pan-Africanist, right? And he was talking about what he
Just like
sees
me.
that is unique in Africa,
Hmm.
maddening, is that we listen to our leaders tell us nonsense. You're like, oh, I will build a church, I'll build a mosque, I'll do this, I'll do that. And we say, oh, yes, we like him, because it's usually a him, very rarely a she or her. But we will say, it's true now. I mean, it's true. It's like, God forbid our leaders are women. They must be men. They must be over 50. But anyways, I digress. But, like he was saying about how we listen to what they tell us and then we celebrate that. We don't tell them rarely. We hardly ever tell them what we want.
Hmm.
And I think that is inherently problematic because we don't have a voice. We don't think we have a voice. So I can come tomorrow if I can pay the billions of naira or whatever, how much millions I need to get a seat to run for office. I can come and be like, I'm going to build skyscrapers. I'm going to take you up to the moon. And that's it. People are excited about that because it sounds good. But people are not thinking about the bare necessities that they need and the challenges that they have in healthcare and education, in literally having power, in transportation, logistics, in food, in having a decent, livable wage. The average salary, income, I checked a couple of months ago, in Nigeria was less than 400,000 naira. That is less than 400 euros a year.
Yeah, but there's something I want to. Okay, so I want to challenge something there.
Challenge away.
I want to say that Africans. I think Africans are smarter than politicians just telling us and we just, we listen. I think, yes, they say all those things. And, Africans, you mentioned your friend from Kenya. I think that we hear it, right? But what choice, what's the choice? I mean, with people, they're going to say what they have to say. We hear it, but I guarantee that majority of people don't even believe it, right? But the thing is that how do we hold them accountable if they don't deliver?
That is the thing. We need to rise from apathy. I think that is inherently, maybe fundamentally, the challenge that we have as a continent. I think the challenge that we have as a group of people,
Mm-hmm.
Where, yes, we don't believe it. But I think there is this sense of apathy where I will do for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I will take care of my own. And this is, again, comes back to the construct of, I think, say, take Nigerians. Nigerians are inherently good people. They will take care of their villagers. They will take care of their aunties and their uncles. But they'll take care of their people, and everybody else is fair game, right? I think power is never given. Power is taken. And recently I've been thinking a lot about this around good people must pursue power aggressively. Because the bad people or the incompetent people or the people who have no business being leaders are the ones who are pursuing power aggressively and they are getting it. And the rest of us are on the sidelines lamenting about how bad their leadership is. Right? So, but I think there's something about knowing the facts. Like I think I told you the other day we talked. The number of out of school children in Nigeria is 20 million.
Really?
Children are out of school. Yes.
That's interesting. Wow, I wouldn't think that,
No
but
one thinks that, but it's true.
because we value education so much, right?
I think we value education, but it also comes down to the family you're in and what they can afford. Now, if you think about in areas like in rural areas where there's no school, like some kids are learning under the tree, there's no chair, no table, nothing.
Right.
That's a reality for a lot of kids. 20 million. That's a couple of countries.
Yeah.
And we're not reducing in population, we're increasing. So it's problematic. And so I feel like if people know this, because we always think it's better than it actually is, but it's rarely that way. There's a privilege in being us, the people who come from, middle class and wealthy-ish families, right? Or like above middle class. And we can go abroad, we can do our thing. And we're just like, no, it's not that bad. It's good. We went to private schools now. Like, it's like, no, it's great. We don't know the reality for a lot of kids.
That's true. But do you think that if government helps, separate ethnic lines and religion from all that, but do you think that will help with bringing a collective Nigerian identity?
Definitely.
You think so?
On leadership, if we separate it and we're able to see like Nigeria as a ship that we need to run,
Yeah.
and all the nonsense and we figure that other bits out. But I think a separation is going to be important. And we need to, on this chat, maybe not today, but I think we do need to talk about ethnicity because that's also a big challenge, right? For a lot of us. It's like, which ethnic group are you from? I think historically, we also need to be able to tie back to, I mean, you know me, I'm always going to tie it back to history. I think once we know better, we can do better. So yes, but I think secularism is going to be really important. The countries that have done it successfully have made progress.
When you say secularism, what do you mean? Because when you say secularism, I'm envisioning that some people listening might think that, okay, you want a country where there is no religion or no moral foundation, right? It's just, it becomes everybody do what you want. I don't want to get too controversial with it, but African countries have a line on what they accept. Whether when you come to the LGBTQ community, when you come to various things.
I hope we're going to have that conversation on this chat. Okay.
Whether when it comes to
to have that conversation
and how women should dress, those kind of things. I remember there was a Nollywood actress, Ngozi Musu or somebody like that. There's a clip of her. She had some people come to audition, some girls, and what they were wearing to her, they shouldn't have worn those kind of things, and she scolded them publicly, right? And online, some people were like, "Why would she do that? People are allowed to wear whatever they want. If she didn't want that, then some people were like, no, those girls, people should be not come out wearing only bra and this and that, and there was this, kind of debate. So when you talk about secularism, right? So I want to hear from you, like, Why? What do you mean? You know, let me know.
I mean, I feel so triggered by all those things you just said now.
I know you.
Ngozi Wonsuhu. You
That's
don't
why I
get
know.
to
I know.
police what
I know.
somebody wears. Like, what the
Yeah, yeah.
hell?
But
How
that's
about
the
we
thing.
mind our own business?
But that's the thing. If you want a secular society in
But
Nigeria, then
there's a separation. So what secularism means is that it's fundamentally a principle that advocates for the separation of religion from
Mhm,
state and public affairs, right? So it ensures that government does not favor or disfavor any particular religion or belief system. So there
mhm.
should be no conversation around he's a Christian, so the VP should be a Muslim. Like, no, it's who is the most competent person to lead, period.
Okay.
Right? So
So
that's my thing.
secularism, this sense, doesn't have to do with this is secular music. It doesn't have to do with
No, it's just
okay,
separation of like
separation. Okay,
church and
okay.
states
All
or
right,
like
great.
mosque and states and religion and
Mm-hmm,
states.
mm-hmm,
You know, I remember like when I was in Nigeria one time and I got into a whole argument with like the Sunday school teacher because they had said
mm-hmm.
some rubbish that was
What's the
not grounded
rubbish?
in any kind of fact, right? And then everyone was like there nodding their head. I think the guy was saying something around if you're a girl over 16 or something and you live with a man, God will
Mm-hmm.
punish you or some nonsense like that. I said, what if that man is my brother? I said, yeah, God will punish you too. I said, God will punish you for saying that. You know, they reported me to my mother. I was like, I'm not going to come to this church anymore. This is ridiculous. I have
Mm-hmm.
been sitting like in audience and men, women are talking nonsense. And I'm just
Mm-hmm.
like, who are you? How dare you? Like you
Mm-hmm.
preach this and people just soak it in. I'm going to deviate from the point, but I also just want to point out at some points, every time when the pastor comes out and prays for barren women, and then you see these women flocking to the altar, like praying, they want God to give them babies. They never for once consider that is the man that is shooting blanks. So I think like if we're going to talk about religion is fundamentally flawed and there is no religion, not a single one that benefits women. So women need their own freaking religion.
We'll talk about that later on. That's need to unpack. We need to unpack that. Oh, that's heavy. That's heavy. We have to unpack that
Every
on a
religion is
later
just
date.
like women shrink, you're insignificant, you're worthless, you're nothing.
Mm.
Next to a man, you're dust. No.
We'll unpack that later on. But yeah, okay. We'll unpack that later on.
I will control myself.
Well, no. We'll talk about all these things. But okay, so basically, you're saying that if we void all this ethnicity and stuff, it's possible for Nigeria to have a national identity and where Nigerians, that's it.
Yes. I mean, we've somehow managed to do it abroad, Ify. Outside of Nigeria, we're Nigerians.
So let me ask you this question: do you think that's why Peter Obi was not elected?
I don't know enough about Peter Obi and his
Hmm.
election. I
Hmm.
do know Peter Obi was previously the governor of Anambra State.
Right.
My question for anyone running is what did he do in Anambra State? And how is
Hmm.
he going to amplify or multiply that when he runs a country?
Right.
What did he not do in
Hmm.
Anambra State that he should have done? So for
Okay.
any of them, like I am 100% non-partisan. I don't
Hmm.
care who leads as long as it's the right person. I
Right.
think there was a lot of like my husband was super excited about Peter Obi and my husband is not even Nigerian.
Hmm.
Super excited. Just some new blood, something fresh,
Yeah.
something different. But something fresh is not the reason why we should place somebody in governance.
Yeah, I agree.
And something old is definitely not the reason why we should place anyone in
I
governance.
agree.
I don't care who leads the country. What I
Right.
do care is you're the best person to lead the country. So to hell with whichever like states or ethnicity or religion they're affiliated with.
Right.
We need better for the country. We need better for our people. Like I want to see a country that I feel like my kids can go back to and have a future. Right now, I don't see it.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the sentiment that a lot of people will say. But I always like to be a bit optimistic. I think we are getting there. I think right. Like the
If you were getting there, but that getting there can be in 150 years, and I'm dead by then, and you're dead by then.
that's a valid point. But progress. I think progress. Unless we want to radicalize everything, but I think that it's gonna take.
There's nothing radical about asking for the bare minimum. We do not even ask for the bare minimum. No, we don't. Tell me one way we've asked for the minimum as Nigerians. Like one way our leaders have showed up for us.
But that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. I think Nigerians ask for the bare minimum, right? I think that the government don't show up for us, right? I think the problem here is that I think Nigerians feel so powerless because the office of the government or the presidency, it's like it's my turn, right? So yeah, that's what it is. It's like it's my turn kind of thing. So I
That
think
was
a lot of
wild.
Nigerians powerless, but at the same time, I think a lot of Nigerians are beginning to see a light at the end of the tunnel. And the reason is because there are various mediums, like we're having this discussion now. People are talking. Hopefully, someone is going to listen to our conversation. And maybe the person always believed in, oh, I have to vote because this person is a Christian or a Muslim. But the person will see that, hey, that is not the reason why I should be voting. I should be voting because this person aligns with what I want. If I'm a businessman, how is this person going to make the Nigerian business environment more conducive for investment? If I'm an educator, what is this person going to do to make sure teachers are getting paid well? And teachers are not, there's no strike. Teachers are not begging for their money every term or whatever. So this kind of things, hopefully that's what people will gain from it. I think that Nigerians are asking for it, but the problem is that they're not just getting it. How do Nigerians begin to really demand and no longer ask for the bare minimum? I think that there needs to be a point where you have more younger people controlling or younger people in charge of some of this, like INEC. And I'm tired of every big position in Nigeria being an old person. Like, then I think there needs to be younger people who have a neutral stance on things and who really want change, to whether it's counting of the votings and things like that, and just yeah.
I do want to say though, like younger people are no better. I mean, the few that have gotten into office have not.
Which young
They've
person?
been. There's someone, I forget his name now, who embezzled more, stole more than anybody else. Like, so I mean, but I think it's a function of the system.
It is.
The system is designed to reproduce the same type of people. You're there, you're there, it's your turn. How much can you take in 4 years, in 2 years, and however much you're there? That's the reality. But I do think when you ask about like what needs to change, what do we need to do? I think we need to start thinking about we cannot demand better if we cannot define better. Like for me, like, as you know, when things start to nag me, I can't help myself. I need to like crack it. So as you know, I've been working on this like citizen blueprints where I also for myself want to be able to distill what needs to change. So I've kind of created this list and maybe it's something we can link here where right now I've done education. This was how I found out that 20 million children are out of school as of 2023. And by 2025, it's more. Yeah. And 2026 and 2027, it's just getting worse because we just don't have the infrastructure. And I think, so I'm creating these blueprints, like I'm consuming so much information. I'm reducing it into like hopefully digestible research that people can use to understand what should I be asking for. So when we say things like, what does better education look like? Or we need better education system, we know specifically we're asking for like access for all. Because there's no access for all. Safe and functional schools where there's desks, there's toilets, there's clean water, there's electricity that no one is learning under trees. We're asking for things like qualified supported teachers. Teachers are not supported. We need to train, I believe it was 250,000 teachers to meet the educational demand we currently have in terms of like literacy. There's also relevant curriculum. Like we're still learning this colonial nonsense. Are people learning what they need for the future? Like at the intersection of like entrepreneurship, digital skills, critical thinking, right? And then things around like transparency and accountability. What does that mean? Public trackable budgets for education. So If the government or my local government area spent less, or you claim that you spent 1 billion naira or 10 billion naira, where did it go? We need to know what we're asking for. It needs to be specific. It needs to be tangible. It needs to be something we can measure. And that's something I'm building currently just for myself, just so I feel less crazy about this whole mess. Is just like,
Right.
okay, and how can we quantify that? How can we amplify that? Because if we cannot define what better is specifically with specificity, we can't demand it.
But like I agree with the premise of like everything you're talking about. So yeah, I mean you have to know what you want.
Yeah.
I'm all for that. And I think a lot of people, and like I said it before, I think a lot of Nigerians know what they want, but the problem now is that how is it going to be delivered, and do we trust the system to give us what we want, and how do we create a system that can actually give us what we want? One thing I know is that I just think that the system within the country, it just needs a revamp. It needs someone to come in there. That's why I keep saying that it's democracy. Like when I look at countries like Rwanda, for Paul Kagame is one of my. I think he's one of the. I know people have their things about him. I think he's one of, but there's no Rwandan I've ever met. I say out of 100, about maybe one or two have said something negative about him. They all praise him. They all like what he's doing. I mean, for Christ's sake, Rwanda is like one of the cleanest. The list of like, is it best country?
Kigali is, I've been to a lot of cities across the world, like
And
across
Kigali.
all the continents in the
Yeah.
world. And I swear I couldn't find a speck of dust on the
Yeah.
road in Kigali.
And this is the thing, and that's where it starts from. And when you do those kind of things, the people will garner around you as a leader and things like that. So I think that there needs to be a revamp of the Nigerian system. We need to have a leader who will come in and just, I don't know, it might have to be a radical approach that this person would take, but someone has to come in there and say, okay, this has not been working for years. We need to change this. We need to change this. We need to change this. And I don't mind the person being in office for 10, 15 years. And that is the thing. I think one of the other problems Nigeria has is that we follow this democratic form of 4-year terms.
On
And I think
paper.
that, but
Yes,
I mean,
the
people
4-year
leave
terms. Yes,
4-year
yes.
terms and they come back again. But the thing, I think that for a country like most African countries, I really don't think 4 years is enough. I think because if you watch, even for governors, they will build hospitals, for example, and then when they leave, somebody else will come in, and that person has another ideology. They will abandon the hospital that this person was building. And if you go to like places in the east, for example, they're like all this. And the governor started doing it. He left office. If another person came in, couldn't complete it because the person started doing their own thing. So I think these are all things that need to be changed.
But I don't think it's a function of the 4 years in office. I think it's a function of weak institutions. Because if we have strong institutions, it's irrelevant how long someone is in office. There's something called, succession and continuity.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's what I mean by
because
when I
if I
say that.
sign a contract with you and we respect our laws, and that contract is for you to finish a building for 10 years, even when I'm out of office, that contract still holds.
I agree. And that's what I'm talking about, the fact that someone needs to come in and revamp this, because I don't think that these leaders follow that contract. I don't think they follow it.
I think people maybe need, so actually, as a challenge to that, I hear you and I agree mostly. I think maybe we need 2 years each.
You think?
Yeah. You come in there, you mess around for 2 years, we kick you out. So the next person comes in. It's quick. It's like, think about it from a startup perspective. You come, you don't do what you're supposed to do, you're out. We pivot, we go somewhere else.
That wouldn't be considered a democratic government.
I think we can rewrite, and that's one of the things that also African countries need to figure out for themselves. I actually think if you look at countries like Norway, where you have social democracy, for example, or socialist countries, it's operated differently. Governance is usually like on a coalition. I consider myself Pan-African. Yeah, it's something we have in common. I think we can collectively look at what does governance mean for our own context. Like it's one thing to come from a lot of these countries that are thriving, have 200, 300 years in front of them, or behind them rather. Whereas a lot of these African countries are on their 100 years old, post-independence, right? And oftentimes a lot of them were different countries that were forcibly merged together,
Right.
So it's like, what does governance look like for us? What does religion look like for us? What is our identity?
Contextual
Exactly.
democracy. Yeah, I've
We
talked
need to
about that.
define for
What it means for us.
ourselves
I
what it
agree.
means and how quickly we need to pivot. Like, I run businesses and I work for some of the biggest brands in the world, right? You think if there's a shitty leader, excuse my French, they're hanging around for 4 years? What? They're being kicked out. And somebody else is coming in. And they will continue to be kicked out until the right person comes and does the job. And I feel like that is almost what we need to adopt. 4 years is too long.
I definitely agree with like a contextual or based on what works for, like revamping these things. Like if we're doing democracy, we can call it a Nigerian democracy, like something that works for the country.
We don't even need to
And
call
not
it a democracy. We just call it
something,
leadership.
whatever,
Leadership for us.
whatever works. Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that's what Nigeria and most African countries need to do. And I think the countries that are doing it are being successful. That's what's happening. Burkina Faso, Mali, Senegal, these countries are becoming very successful because of the fact that, like, you know what? This doesn't work for us. Let's create what works for us. So yeah. So I agree.
You know why those countries are doing well?
Why?
Whichever way we look at it, I think like in many ways the West might look at some of these countries and be like they have a tyrant as leaders. I think these countries are doing well because the leaders have vision and political will. They have the will to say no to extractive systems and structures. They have the will to say, no, we don't need more mosques or churches. We need schools. So we need leaders that have proper vision, which is why we cannot just like drool over the first person that can string 2 sentences together. Like, we need to demand more. Again, we need to think about, if this was my child, would I put my child in this person's hand to take care of? Because sometimes we need to contextualize things to be like, wait, why am I voting for this person? Because that's the thing. I will vote for a newborn baby if they can run the country better. I will vote from somebody from a different country if they can run Nigeria better. And that's where we all need to be. That's where we need to get.
I agree. Yeah. So all in all, I think that when we talk about politics and religion and this, I think, yes, those things exist. They're never going to go away. But I think that, yes, Nigeria needs to find a way to
separate
it and really hone down on. And I think it has to come from above.
But we're going to have to demand it, because the thing politicians fear the most are people with knowledge, who have a voice, who know what to ask for.
Yeah.
Right? And that is what scares politicians the most. We need to know first. The people need to know. The people need to understand. I mean, the president is one guy. Governors are a couple of people, 36 people, right?
Yeah.
At best. It's millions of people together. So what does collective civic understanding and education and knowledge and then demands look like in terms of like the bare minimum that we will accept from our governance? I think that's something we need to think about. And I do want to stress, like, I believe that I'm never one to say religion is not good, or this person is not good, or that person is not doing right by God. I am here for whatever makes people feel good, feel a sense of community. I'm a very spiritual person. I believe in a God, and she's awesome, So I think my God is a woman. So I don't want people walking away from this thinking that I have a disdain for religion. I think it's important. I think it's like therapy. It's like community. It's home. But I think it needs to be separated from function of governance and a state. And we also need to start thinking of Nigeria as a business that we have invested in.
Right.
And we want to see the best leaders. Otherwise, we're going to lose a bunch of money. And then we'll have nothing to send our kids to school. We'll have no 401k or whatever it is that people do in terms of like savings and retirement. Yeah? Yeah.
No, I think people do understand that, but I just think that most times politicians use that as a way to get votes. And once people
Yeah.
understand that it's a distraction, then I think that things will
Hmm.
go, in the right direction. But yeah, great conversation.
As we say
I
in
mean,
Nigeria, they no bomb me yesterday. Yeah.
at
Like, so when
all,
the
at
politician
all,
comes and
at
say like
all.
nonsense, you're like,
Exactly.
hold up.
Yeah. Right, exactly. That's the things. But
Yeah.
yeah, we're definitely going to be having more
Yeah.
conversations
This
and
was
more
nice.
different topics. Just keep it locked in and
Yeah.
keep watching. Let us know what you think. If you have a topic that you want us to discuss, feel free to like add
Yeah, I
it.
was about to
And we'll
say
just
that. Let
do
us know what we
next
need to
week.
break down. Was
Hmm.
super nerds. Yes.
All right.
All right.
All
Okay
right. Now
then.
we'll talk.
Thank you all. Thank you for spending time with us on Overnight Wisdom. If this conversation moved you, inspired you, or made you pause, please like, leave a comment, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. You can follow the show wherever you get your podcasts, and if you're feeling generous, a rating or review goes a long way in helping others find us too. Until next time, stay curious, stay tender, and may the wisdom you need find you exactly when you're ready.